The Broad Perspective Network is not responsible for the content of the following program.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm glad you're with us today. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Kevin Lawson.
And we are going to tackle a couple of different subjects, but the main one we want to talk about is the global water crisis. This has been going on. We've had water experts on the Broad Perspective over the years, but it is escalating and people aren't paying attention. In California, where we all that record this show live, we do pay attention because many of us have been experiencing drought. Most of the state has been in drought conditions. We had a little reprieve from it with some rains last year, but this year, well, when I say this year, I should say 2017, we had very little rain, so our reservoirs were not replenished. Water issues, I think, are going to be the biggest issue in the whole world coming up because so many countries are struggling with drought. And there's a lot of hypotheses on why this is and what's going on, but we will address them all. But in the meantime, a lot of the information we're pulling is from, of course, sources on the internet and magazines and so on and so forth. The one that piqued my interest is the one, of course, in the Week magazine, and it says it starts out with the global water crisis, and Cape Town, South Africa, is really, really suffering. And their date, as far as zero, is July 9th, where they believe they will totally run out of water. Now they're thinking maybe they're going to have to move it forward a little bit, but they are limited to, at the time from July 9th, they will be limited to 25 liters a day. Now think about liters. That's isn't like
takes 3 liters to make a gallon.
There you go.
I'm sorry, no, 3 liters. Yeah, 3 liters to make a gallon.
Okay, so
3.78.
Divide 25 by 3, and you've got
8.
Yeah,
8 gallons of water.
8 gallons of water, and that's not only to drink. That is to do your laundry. That is to cook your food. That is to bathe. That is to water your plants. That is to water your garden. That's it. And they may have to cut down with that. Violence, it could be very nasty. They're not the only ones that are suffering. There are so many countries that are in this position. Now we look at the East Coast of the United States. Well, they've just had deluges of water and flooding. The problem with a lot of that is the runoff is not going into the aquifers. When it comes in torrential downpours, the ground doesn't soak it up and it doesn't go down through the percolation process. So there's a lot to talk about on this, and I think it's a really important issue. I remember years ago someone saying that the thing that China's going to want from us is our water. They're going to come over here with big tankers for our water. Well, here's the thing. We aren't necessarily going to have the water to share with them or with anybody. We aren't going to have enough water for ourselves. When you look at the Native American reservations, they have been parched for water. Like the Navajo Reservation in Arizona is tragic. It is tragic. These people don't have water. And there's several of those places in this country that have such water shortages. It's like there's one tub, and when I say tub, it's not a bathtub. It's a silver tub for the whole family to take a bath with. And you've heard the saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, the theory behind that, or the story behind that, is because the baby was the last one to get bathed. So it went down so by the time the baby got bathed, the bathwater was so dirty, and it's metaphorical, but the baby wouldn't be seen in the water because you go to throw it out and it's so dirty the baby wouldn't be seen. But anyway, this is a very big issue, and I don't think people take it seriously. I know that a lot of our listeners are aware that we talk about prepping and so on and so forth. And I had a girlfriend the other day. Another friend was placing an order for water barrels, and I said, "Oh, that's great," because the price was phenomenal. And I offered it to a girlfriend. I said, this is for earthquake preparedness, if nothing else, because we do live in earthquake country. You might want to have a little bit of water. And so she emailed me back. She says, "Oh no, we're fine. We've got about 3 or 4 cases of water." bottled water, 3 or 4 cases of bottled water. And I just took a deep breath and said, okay, that's fine. Just wanted to offer you the opportunity. But I'm thinking to myself, well, that'll be gone, in a day? You won't be able to.
A day.
A day, yeah, exactly. You can't
or
flush.
less, depending on how many people are in her family.
Yeah, you're surely not. And then think about this: flushing your toilet. There is 1,000 things you need water for, and 3 or 4 cases of bottled water aren't going to last you at all. But people don't think. They think they're setting good. They think they're prepped with that. And for a lot of us, if an earthquake were to hit today, we could easily be cut off because we're in a valley. And we could easily be cut off from anywhere else. We'd be on our own, and it happens to be a desert valley. So there's just a lot to consider with this. Jump in here, guys.
All right. We just announced that there is a global water crisis. And over at cmetrics.com, you will see an article if you put in 25 facts you should know about the global water crisis. In this article, it starts off by saying that by 2025, an estimated 1.8 billion people will live in areas plagued by water scarcity, with 2/3 of the world's population living in water-stressed regions. Now, what we don't really understand is that it all comes down to resources. Water is a resource. Mm-hmm. That's why when we were evolving as human beings, we always lived near water. We lived by the rivers. We lived by the lakes and the ocean. And that's what made life possible for us. But that's why deserts are desolate. There is no water. So it's very difficult for life to live there. So when we start talking about water crisis, what we're really saying is about a crisis of resources, which is going to put an extreme stress on the population as it's existing right now, which means that if this crisis isn't solved, people are going to start disappearing.
Exactly. And I know that years ago, and I have no idea what context this was in or what the story was I was reading at the time, but the theory was that the next big war will be fought over water. And I remember them using the examples like China will be coming with big tankers from China to the United States because we've talked about our crystal clean mountain streams and mountain brooks and all this kind of stuff, which none of is true, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But nonetheless, we've presented this picture of we've got all this water and this good water, and when it isn't the truth, and we certainly won't have it to share.
I think that in the context of the world, water is going to become a major, major issue, and it's because as humans, we need water to survive on any level. Humans use 3 different kinds of water. We use our agricultural water to grow the foods that we then eat. We use our gray water, showers, washing our hands, hygiene, and then we use our black water, toilets, urine, feces. And I think that if we are able to go back to what it once was, where humans are starting to save the water and use the water that's gray and can be reused, then I think that would conserve our water enough to where we're able to slow down the water crisis. However, it is going to become a major problem because of the fact that you have countries that are now in standoffs because of it. You have countries like India and Pakistan. You have countries like Ethiopia and Egypt. And these countries are foreseeing the future because water has always been a prevalent issue within their nations. And for let's say Ethiopia right now spending $4.2 billion, we have to understand that the Nile River in itself is a humongous river. And for Egypt, which is one of their main tourist attractions, is the Nile River, it not only would prevent them from getting fresh water, but it would also slow up their tourism, which could then prevent them from being able to obtain water from other countries if necessary, because tourism in Egypt is a major part of their means of survival. And we have to look at what Ethiopia is doing in preparation for the future. What they're doing is they're trying to make sure that if need be, their citizens have enough. But would this cause a war? Because Ethiopia not being a strong superpower, would China, would America, would Iran, would any of these countries, Saudi Arabia, would any of these countries that do have the superpower capabilities then embark out to colonize? And I say colonize because we've always had a way of saying, hey, we're just here to be friends, but we've always had an objective. And if water becomes a crisis in America or any of these countries that I mentioned, how long would it be until we do wage war for the benefit of our citizens?
Oh, if there's a resource that we think we can use, trust me, we'll be there, as will any other country that thinks they can exploit whatever resource they can.
And I think that right now we're sitting here in 2018 and we're looking at 2050. And as human beings, we should look at our generations to come. We should look at the future. We should always be preparing for the future. However, technology is coming along, and it's coming along fast. And while we're sitting here talking, there's scientists somewhere sitting trying to convert salt water into fresh water, or water that's not usable at all because of toxins, maybe be from natural things like acid rain or whatever the case may be. They're trying to convert it back into healthy water. And we're seeing this again with reused and recycled toilet paper. We're seeing it with reused bottles. We're seeing it with a lot of our things that we're using on an everyday basis. I'm starting to think that the ways of old need to come back. We need to start, if you look at that, 25 liters, that's 25 soda bottles for those that don't have the visual picture.
Right.
25 of your Sprite, Coca-Cola, Pepsi bottles that you get out the vending machine is 25 of those that your entire family has to use for the entire day. And that is a big deal when it comes to just flushing a toilet or just taking a shower or just washing the dishes. So then would the solution be digging those holes that we once dug at one point in time and having those outhouses that went into the floor deep, and instead of digging and digging and digging trying to find water, we're saving the water by digging the hole for the fecal matter and the feces and whatever the case may be, which was actually at one point in time, quote unquote, good for the earth. I don't know how, but good for the earth. It
grows trees.
Yeah.
Fruit trees love it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they do. We don't love it.
Of course, now they're so filled with, also combined with drugs and everything else that humans are taking. So, that's a whole nother story.
And I
you mean the waste is contaminated now?
There you go. That's the problem with the water system. You cannot check any water system in the United States. I don't know about the other countries, but I do know here in the United States, every single water system is contaminated with pharmaceuticals.
And lead.
Yes.
And chromium-6.
Yep.
And cadmium and arsenic.
I was about to say an arsenic. But here it is where we need to start looking around us for resources in ourselves. A lot of us spend money on bottled water. I mean, you got Arrowhead, all kind of different ones, Fiji, all Smart Water. There's so many different brands of bottled water that we spend money on. But are we really looking at what bottled water is doing to our environment? Are we really looking to what bottled water could be choking off from the simple fact that we're not using the money to repair the pipes necessary in order to get the water we need? Because here it is where 40% of the water we're losing in our cities is because of old rickety pipes.
There you go. Old infrastructure. Good point. That's really important. Go ahead, Greg.
You segue perfectly into what I think is very important. We had a taste of it. Well, it was partially exposed when we had our drought situation here in California, how very far upstream, which would be Sacramento, California for us, there was a huge debate or argument over who gets the water, because the corporations put the foot down and said that we are entitled to the water for financial reasons before the public was entitled to the water for agriculture. And this is the reason why our Central Valley was being limited their water, is because during the drought, they allocated the water right to the Nestle's and the Aquafinas and all those companies so that they had their water allocations, but the Central Valley, which has all our gardens, was not getting the water that they needed to grow our food.
You're absolutely right.
Yes.
And that's a big deal. The other thing is that instead of humans moving out to a less fertile area, the humans move to the fertile areas. They're getting kicked the farmers out to the dry, arid regions that require more water. So that's a big issue. We're going to come back and address this more in the next segment, because this is a big deal, folks. This is a big deal, and it involves all of us, whether you think it does or not. Yes, you can still run down to the corner 7-Eleven and get your bottle of Smart Water or Evian or Fiji or whatever it is you want today. Today you can get that.
Well, you're really living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. But it may not be there tomorrow. So we'll be right back. We'll pick up this discussion in just a moment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, I am His Majesty the Soul, King of Mauritius, and I invite you to help me build the world's planetary egg, an ecological geophysical galleon. It's approximately 180 acres, and it is home to 3,000 researchers from around the world. It is the world's first sovereign planetary independent jurisdiction that has the capability of advancing and progressing and fast-tracking every aspect of innovation, helping us redefine what it means to be human in a new world. So check out our website. It's www.mauricii.com. MORACEAE.com. I look forward to seeing you, and please contribute, donate to the GoFundMe page. I look forward to meeting you, and let's build the planetary egg. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Kevin Lawson.
When we took our break, we were talking about corporations and their use of water, etc. And what I think the average citizenry really doesn't give a lot of thought to or pay attention to is agriculture. And yes, agriculture is the biggest consumer of water, but if they don't consume water, they don't grow our food. They don't grow our crops. They don't grow our wheat to make bread and our produce to make salads and
feed
the animals. Exactly. So all these things require water, and yes, they are the biggest users, but the end result is we still use that. So it is a necessary, I don't want to say necessary evil because it's not even evil. It's a necessary use for what water is, and we've really put crimps and clamps on farmers and how much they can use, which is tough. It depends on your area, but what I do know, because my uncle managed Telus Ranch in California, and he was an expert in irrigation, what I do know is that we have kicked the farmers out to the arid land, and we have taken, and cities have taken over the fertile land. And do we really need to be on fertile land that could be used for agriculture? In the long run, I think we'd come out ahead with our water usage if we had maybe gone to the arid areas more so than the farmers and let them farm on fertile land that they didn't need so much irrigation.
Well, that means that we'd have to commute more, and who wants to do that?
That's true, and then we'd use another resource.
And I'm being sarcastic, but, it's about making the necessary sacrifices, but that's the problem with society, in a sense, is that we're always looking for the shortcuts. We want everything to be convenient, and we don't want to necessarily do the work that's necessary for long-term sustainability. We want everything right here, right now, no matter what the cost of it is. And that's where I guess we can say the chickens are coming home to roost now, because all of those bad decisions from the past are now rearing their ugly heads and holding us accountable.
Yeah, that's true.
I think also that we need to start innovating. We need to start bringing in those that come from countries and nations where water has always been a problem, and it's something that they have spent their life trying to figure out, whether it's been the digging of wells and the perfection of that, or irrigation, or whatever the case may be. There has to be a system in which things can be devised so that we are able to get the necessary water and slow down the water crisis. And I say that because when you have nations, entire nations, that have come to the point of really understanding that drought is inevitable. In other words, you have places in the Middle East, places in Africa where every year they have a drought, and it's because of what they consider to be the dry season. I think that once we start pulling scientists from these regions and they start coming over here, like you said, we're forcing the farmers out. They can show them how to farm in a drier climate. They can show them how to harvest in drier climates, or show them how to have agricultural land in its entirety, or make the land more fertile, or have livestock. Even a lot of our livestock can survive in a rural area. However, water is a major concern, and the hotter it is, the more water that's necessary for our livestock to survive.
Absolutely. There are crops that use more water than others. There are some that are much more frugal, or much less. They don't require as much water to thrive. I know that there was, in the last drought, there was a big to-do about almond farmers, because almonds take a lot of water, and they felt that was a big waste. We don't need almonds. Well, I think almonds are very important, and they're an extremely good source of nutrition.
It's healthy fat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
so,
avocados.
Yeah, so I would hate to do away with our ability to have almonds, but I don't know if it comes down to a crop that doesn't use it. We may have a very selective variety of things we can eat. If we're not able to grow what consumes a lot of water, we may only be able to have certain things. And you may be forced to eat lettuce, Kevin. I'm just saying.
Well, I've also thought about it this way. By me, my definition of coffee being a vegetable, because it comes from a bean, those beans aren't going to be able to be grown.
Exactly.
And how many of us Americans drink coffee every single day?
Yes.
How many of us would be able to give up the Starbucks and the coffee bean and the Folgers and the Taster's Choice? It's starting to come to an era where we have to realize that we're not going to be able to do this forever.
Right.
We can't dig a million wells, because then we're all pulling from the same water source. We can't go to the ocean and drink water because it's salt in it. We have to start realizing that our wildlife is going to be affected. Our communities are going to be affected. Our animals are going to be affected. And pretty soon, we're just going to start to see whole communities slowly disappear. And again, I want to point out, again, the areas that go through a dry season where we've seen whole communities, and are still seeing whole communities, suffer for lack of water.
Right.
I want to point out another highlight from the C-Metrics article. And it says, for decades, the Ogallala aquifer, thank you, Vivian, in the United States is one of the world's largest aquifers, has been tapped at rates thousands of times greater than it is being restored. And you brought that up in the beginning, Vivian. I think it was very necessary for us to revisit it, because water has a life cycle as well. You know, the ocean, the sun heats it up, goes up to the sky, makes clouds. It comes down as water and rain. It hits the ground. It soaks into the ground. It goes underground and becomes an aquifer. And then we pump it up to the surface and reuse it. And, of course, those aquifers also fill up lakes and rivers in different areas, right? So we're actually, by tapping into it, we're actually taking away some of the strength or some of the nutrition necessary for rivers and lakes to actually exist, because that's where they get their water from. And, you know, some thermodynamics that come into play that brings it back to the surface. But the point I'm making is that we're extracting it at a much higher rate than it's being replenished. And so we're creating this crisis just on that fundamental level, because we are interrupting nature's natural cycle or organism that allows us to be here in the first place.
And that's really significant, everything you just said, because what we're finding is, see, the percolation process of the water going down through the layers of dirt and sand and rock and all that kind of stuff, what it's doing when it does that is picking up minerals. It's picking up the things that make water alive and that keep us alive. Because right now, a lot of what we're drinking is dead water. It's pulled out too soon. The water hasn't had a chance to go down through all these layers of purification. That's a lot of it as well.
And mature.
Yeah, mature water. Yeah, exactly. And get all these vital nutrients that we need. We're pulling it off too soon because we need the water. We need it to run our swimming pools, and we need it to run our water parks and our car washes and all these things that we do. But it's not good water. It's dead water.
And I think that we're even starting to ignore the bigger problem which running out of water is going to bring. We have to remember that if we look at the examples of natural disasters, meaning the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the earthquakes, and things that we've seen around the world, the major thing that stands out is what? Water, because you can only survive about 72 hours with no form of water, to whereas the comparison of food, you could last about 3 weeks with no food in your system. And it's coming to the point where how dangerous are things going to get, and how quick are things going to get dangerous when there's no water to have. There's no bottled water. There's no tap water. There's no running water.
Right.
Where are you going to go for this source of water, and what are you going to be willing to do for it? And not only that, are the ends going to justify the means? Well, we're talking about the water crisis and coming up with a solution so that we can have water in the long run, and those ends justify the means. But are we going to be saying the same when our country now sends our young soldiers across the waters, across these salt waters that we can't even drink, to justify the end, for the ends to justify the means, for us to steal water? Because that's what it's going to be. Right now we're talking about oil and poppy and all these other things. In a minute it's going to be us talking about water. And are we going to still have the same mentality we have now with, yes, it justifies the means if it's water?
But we wouldn't even have enough water to provide our soldiers with the means to hydrate if we aren't careful. And there's just so much to be considered here. And again, it's because it's not, people don't think about it because it's not part of their consciousness. They still turn on their faucet and something still comes out. Now, we have seen instances like in the Midwest where they're doing fracking, where you can light your water on fire that comes out of the faucet because they're disturbing some of the other elements in the ground. But methane, right. But generally speaking, right now, you still turn on your faucet and you still have something that comes out of it. That could change at the blink of an eye. At the blink of an eye. What happens when you turn on your faucet and there's nothing? And for anybody who's had any work done on their home or their property or whatever, and you have to turn the water off and you forget, like say like my husband's out repairing something and I forget to turn the water off, and I go to wash dishes or something and there's no water coming out, and there's this momentary feeling of panic. There's this momentary feeling of panic. And then oh yeah, our water's turned off. But you see, it goes away really fast because there's resolution. All he has to do is turn the main water valve back on. Now, I can remember growing up in the Midwest, and my grandparents, my grandmother's friend, Laura Roberts, lived on a farm in northwest Iowa. And she had a well, and she had a cistern in her kitchen, and she had a corncob stove. That's how she cooked. And that cistern was at the kitchen sink, and she would pump. She'd pump. And for those of you who don't know what a cistern is, I know you've seen it. It's like maybe a red thing, and it's got a spout that comes out of it, and you pump till you can suck up some water, and that's how she'd wash her dishes. She'd get enough. She'd boil some water on the stove to rinse everything, but she'd wash them initially with that cistern, and that was back in the day. And same way with my grandparents. They had a farm and they had a well, but you'd have to climb down this ladder and you'd have to prime the pump, get water going into the house when it was time to get cleaned up or to do dishes or something. And the rest of the time it was stored in bottles and buckets. But most people don't have a remembrance of any of that.
I think you bring up an extremely important point, and I want to draw a picture for our listeners and anyone else that hears this presentation. This is a simple test to help you understand how critical and how dependent you and your family are on water. Simply, without telling anyone, go and turn off the water to your house, the main water to your house. Don't tell anyone. And then start to record everything that's happening. Johnny goes to the bathroom. Dad, the toilet's not working. What should I do? You go to wash dishes. There's no water. Oh, now the sink's filling up and everything's just starting to get yucky and nasty, right? I can't wash my hair. I can't take a shower.
My clothes are dirty.
My clothes are dirty. My garden is starting to get dry, right? But just do that for a 24-hour period and write down everything that everyone is talking about. And then do the big test. Ask everyone what is their solution to the problem that they encountered because there was no water.
Right.
And that's how you know what you need to do and why it's important for you to have not 24 cases of water in your house, but you should have at least 6 months to a whole year of water stored around your house and in your house. according to what your environment says is possible for you losing water. Because if you live right next door to a lake, okay, you don't have that problem. If you have a 30,000 gallon pool in your backyard, you don't necessarily have that problem if you have a water filtration system to go with that pool.
Or you know how to use it, yeah.
Right. So, but if you're sitting in the middle of nowhere and you don't have ample amount of water stored, you have to be able to deal with that. And you won't know exactly how you're going to deal with it until you get those questions answered.
Exactly. And a lot of people think that, I know I can hear there's a few people out there that are going, well, but we've got the ocean right here. Why aren't we working with that? Well, desalination is not easy. I think Israel is the only country at this point in the world that's mastered desalination. It's extremely expensive. Extremely expensive.
Is that what they use that $40 billion a year from subsidies from America for? Is their water desalination?
It could very well be. Yeah. So it's not the solution we think it is. It would be ideal if it was, but right now we haven't found a cheap enough technology.
Well, we could always do what our listeners love: raise the taxes.
There you go.
Let's raise the taxes a little bit, and we can do anything we want. Make everybody go broker.
Wow, that's a can of worms right there.
It is.
I can just see some Congress people, some politicians, giving this campaign of how we all need to restrict our water uses or raise taxes to supplement and develop these new projects that are going to allow us to continue to use water as we're using now, which of course would be a complete farce, but of course we'll go for that because it sounds good.
It's the bridge to nowhere is what it is. It's another bridge to nowhere. Right now, we need to cut back. It's just that simple. The question is how are we going to do it? Especially as Americans, we're very spoiled. We're used to, like you said, the running water, the flushing toilets. Mm-hmm. And we could say that we're not, but anybody who's traveled abroad knows that we are a very fortunate nation when it comes to the use of water. Because when you go to one of these third world countries and you go to use the toilet, it's not a flush toilet. It's a hole in the ground and a shack. And that is the toilet. And it doesn't matter if you're man, woman, child. That's what everybody uses. So you can imagine the stench. You can imagine the overall look that you think of as an American. But this is everyday life for some of these people.
Okay, very good. We'll pick that up when we come back. We'll be back with more of The Broad Perspective in just a moment. Stay tuned.
The 12th Hour. A show literally about everything. A candid discussion between friends about their different perspectives on what they think may be going on.
Or what is not going on.
With so many different areas of information being given out, we attempt to put together the puzzle pieces to create the broad perspective of the whole picture.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Kevin Lawson.
And we're talking about the global water crisis and what's going on, what we can do. In the Week magazine, there's a paragraph that says, how can water shortages be alleviated? And, of course, we talked about fixing leaky pipes. That accounts for 40% of a city's lost water if they don't repair these pipes. So I would say that would be a big start right away. If your pipes are aging and old, let's get on it, people. That's maybe where our tax money needs to go. Another thing we need to do is reservoirs are vulnerable to drought. We had talked about desalination plants. It's not too likely for any of us. But one thing the city of Los Angeles has done, they've covered surfaces of reservoirs with millions of 4-inch plastic balls. That's shade covers because they say it reverses evaporation. And as we know, evaporation will lose up a lot of water. So it says it's reduced evaporation by 90%, saving 1 billion gallons of water a year. Well, that's significant. Agriculture and those types of industries use overwhelming majority of the water, which we talked about, but maybe if they had financial incentives to use treated wastewater rather than groundwater, that might be a solution there. I know a lot of people, they turn up their nose at that, but that may be what we have to get down to and make it happen. And then and there's a sentence here, nature is not particularly willing to compromise, nor should she. I think she's compromised enough. And
I agree with that one.
Yes, exactly. And so it concludes with the sentence, there will be severe droughts, and if you haven't prepared for it, you will get hammered. And we say that a lot on the broad perspective. Pay attention to this stuff. Be prepared. Be aware. Go ahead, Greg. Take it away.
You know, this article is really talking about how everything has happened. So, well, that last paragraph is really talking about how everything happens in cycles. There'll be cycles of abundance and there'll be cycles of famine. And that's what insurance is all about, is building the things in place just like you would for winter time, right? You would put the systems in place so that when winter gets here and things aren't like they always are, that you can still maintain your way of life and be productive and prosperous, so that when the good cycle comes in, spring and summer, then you can be as productive as possible, and then you repeat the cycle. This is what is really encouraging as solutions. We need to understand that we need to be much more conservative with our water uses. You know, like washing our cars and the water hose is just running down the street. Mm-hmm. You know, there's laws in place where you can get in trouble for it, but it's very difficult to enforce. But again, broken water sprinklers and things like that. We have to be cognitive of these things because water is just really going down the tubes. That is vital for our existence. And we have to no longer take these things for granted and begin to be more conservative.
Exactly. And I've always wondered why where we live in California is, like I mentioned earlier, in the desert. And I don't know why when these communities began growing, they were planting grass in the yards, and that they were putting all these things that were water sucker-uppers.
Yeah, water dependent.
Exactly. And my parents live in Arizona. Now, Arizona, they're also in the desert, but they were smart. They've just zero-escaped with rocks and with indigenous plants, the cactus, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful yards. They're lovely. And they haven't had to they don't have sprinklers in their yards.
Well, it matches the landscape as well.
Exactly.
But you take a desert community like Palm Springs, and their water usage is dramatic because they have Palm Springs looking completely green.
Exactly.
And it has, acres and acres of land that's getting watered. And they have this special, really short grass that's very drought resistant, but it requires all this maintenance and all this other stuff. But, they're completely going against nature. It's a desert. Landscape it like it's a desert, not landscape it like it's the Midwest where it rains every other day.
Exactly.
Well, I think it ties into the lack of knowledge. A lot of us don't have the knowledge to store water or to get the plants indigenous, as you said. A lot of us take the mindset that we had in the city with the nice lawns and everything else. We move to the area that's a little cheaper so that we can have a more prosperous life, and we take that mentality with us with the trees and everything else. And I think that, again, the preparation as far as storing water, the preparation as far as conserving water needs to start being something that's very well practiced and very well expounded upon as far as giving out that knowledge. I think that as a nation, if we're saving now for what happens 10 years or 15 years from now, we can't get hammered. There's no possible way to get hammered because the people that maybe weren't able to do it will be the only people that need the water that we would have. And thus, it would be a less traumatic state. Right now, we have a trauma happening. It is a stab wound, and it is bleeding profusely. And as it bleeds, we're trying to be stitched up. But every time we go to stitch it, we keep putting a Band-Aid on it or butterflies thinking that, okay, this will hold for just a second. Well, the reality is we need staples, and it needs to hold, and it needs to stay. We don't need super glue. We need staples. And that's what it's really coming down to. And like you said, the solution then comes to what are we going to do right now, 2018, in preparation for 2050. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, 2050, something will be out. Maybe that's true. Maybe somebody will distill salt water and we'll go ahead and have drinking salt water. But until that time, it might be the opposite. Maybe every company around us that we know to be a drinking water company or purified water company will drown.
Yeah. You see, we don't know. You're right. And I have to believe that there is a technology that could take care of this. But like everything, it's going to be suppressed if there's money if it would threaten the big bucks of other corporations. And of course, then there's always the people that are going to pay the price for this. Because we are all those little people on the scope of what's going on with it. We are the ones that could stand to hurt the worst, but we're also the ones that can transcend all this if we pay attention and learn how to take care of it. Learn how to purify water. Learn what it takes to store water. It's really simple. Learn what it's like to take water from a source that you find some water somewhere, and how you can refresh it and purify it and have it taste good. I tell you, if you would devote even 5 to 10 minutes on this subject, you'll pretty much know what you need to do, and it's very simple. One thing you might want to do is have a bottle of unscented Clorox bleach in your important
survival bag.
Thank you, because chlorine bleach is a real good purification for water. You don't want any of the other chemicals in there, so make sure it's unscented. But and that'll take you 3 minutes to look up on the internet. How much bleach will it take? What's the pros? What's the cons? Are there any cons? Pay attention to these things. Learn. It won't take long, but it might mean the welfare and survival of your family.
Well, I would say prepare for the ultimate natural disaster. A lot of us in our regions, Midwest, tornadoes, down south, hurricanes, out west, we do earthquakes, and we prepare for these things. We bolt shelves to the walls. We figure out places where we can go. People that live under volcanoes have certain things that they have to prevent themselves from being killed or property being damaged. And I think that all of us spend so much time focusing on the natural disasters that we know are inevitable to hit us. But now the water shortage is inevitable. It will hit. It's just a matter of how hard will you be hit.
Right.
Will you be able to slip the punch, or will you get hit full on? And I think you need to plan for the inevitable. And the inevitable is you will be dependent on water at some point in time in this lifetime.
Exactly.
I like that boxing analogy. I say everyone needs to start with educating yourself, because that's what you pointed out, Kevin, back in the interview, is that the solutions truly lie and start with educating ourselves as to, one, what are our needs, and two, what should we be preparing ourselves with. And an easy formula, and this is a very basic formula, is 1 gallon per adult per day.
They say 3.
Well, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Bare minimum.
Minimum.
And then you can go from there as to calculate what your family needs are. And of course, you have that 2-year-old, that's a quarter of a person, right? And you use these formulas to build your water resources so that you can withstand these emergencies that are inevitable coming.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't take that long. It doesn't take that long to learn this. It doesn't, and there really is minimal expense, if any, to get this put together. I mean, a bottle of Clorox you can get for less than $2, I'm sure. Coffee filters are a good thing to strain water through, and everybody's got coffee filters. They're just good for a lot of things. I don't drink coffee, but I've got coffee filters.
No, so do I.
I would think even in the most extreme instances, the 55-gallon drum, the wrenches, everything that you would need, the siphons, even with that, you would still come up with a total more than likely under $250. Even if you were to go to that length to put the 55-gallon drum of water in your backyard and have everything that it needs to get the water out the drum and be clean, you'd still come up under $250. And I think that a lot of people are scared of water storage because, you see the 55-gallon drum and you're thinking that's, $250 just in itself, when in fact, these gallons are actually made cheap because they know people need them. And the whole thing from there is, what are you going to do to prepare your water to make it safe? A lot of us already have safe drinking tap water. We've just become accustomed to the bottled water for the taste. And I think that we need to start overlooking taste and realize that in order to conserve our water, we're going to have to depend on water that's drinkable rather than what tastes good.
Right. Now, and I can hear the person saying, well, I live in an apartment. I can't do that. And I beg to differ, because we have one of the gals that records with us here on The Broad Perspective. Ingenious. She took 2 55-gallon drums, and she got used ones. So she cleaned them out. She learned how to clean them out. Very simple process in her bathtub, in her apartment. She cleaned these things out thoroughly, and then she filled them. And she cut out a piece of plywood and put on the top and made a beautiful curtain over it and put her lamps on it. They are her end tables, and no one would ever know that she's got 110 gallons of water right there in her living room for when she needs it. And you say, oh, well, how often, what happens when you have to change it? You really don't have to change it. That's the other thing.
Years.
Yeah, at least. And even then, you probably don't have to. And once again, it's learning how to take care of it. When the time comes and she needs that water, she knows what she's going to have to do to make it drinkable and usable. And so there you go. There's an example of someone in an apartment who was able to make things work. And that's really significant because I can hear people asking that question, and there you go.
Well, we want the listeners to also know that we're not just talking about the drinking water.
No.
I know that when people talk about water, we often focus on drinking water. Like Greg pointed out, this is going to be the water that you use the bathroom with. This is going to be the water you shower with. This is going to be the water that you wash your clothes with. This is going to be the water you wash your dishes with. And a lot of us can say, oh, I can wear dirty clothes. But Greg made the example of the 2-year-old. Well, if the 2-year-old is not potty trained, they go through a lot of different diapers. They go through a lot of pants. They go through a lot of clothes. And that's with any 2-year-old. Even if they are potty trained, they throw food. They eat food. They play in dirt. A lot of sickness comes from things being dirty. And that's why the water we know immediately is going to be redirected to our hospitals, because in order for a doctor to perform anything, they have to scrub in.
Right.
We're going to have a lot of sickness because we're going to have our resources where they need to be. A lot of our schools will have water. Why? Because we have our kids there. But it's going to come down to, what are we going to do in the immediate time where at home you don't have this water to be clean?
Right. It's significant. Understanding water, the importance of it, how to take care of it, how to clean it, how to purify it, and what to watch for. I did have a friend, this has been, 30, 40 years ago, out east, who his father was retired from the CIA. He worked in some capacity with something. I don't know, because he never would say what he did. But I just remember, and he was always traveling, but I just remember him saying, I said, what's something that we need to watch out for with terrorism, or how could they affect a whole community? And he said, just watch your water supply. Just watch your water supply. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I suppose that would be a good way to get with people. Watch your water supply. So it's a very, very important subject. There's a lot of information. Once again, listeners, do your homework. 5 or 10 minutes, you can learn a lot.
Well, we don't realize how important water is until you have another country coming to take control of your water rights.
Yeah.
If everyone can just think back in the Wayback Machine and go to Iraq 2003, when George Bush went to war with them, the first thing we did was take control of the water.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes. The very first attack was taking control of the water. Second thing that happened was it took control of the communications. And then the war that we get to see what's going on, right? So this is how important water is. It's always first on the list, because even the troops, like you said, when they get over there, they have to be able to drink.
Exactly. They're not going to have the stamina to do anything. We'll be right back. We're going to take our last break, and we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
BPN. Join the awakening.
The Broad Perspective Network is a portal designed to reveal a new perspective and reality to those who wish to know the truth about the world we live in and our role in it.
BPN. See beyond the illusion.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
And I'm Kevin Lawson.
A couple things we want to wrap up on the water issue. Water rights have always been a major issue with humans. The Milagro Beanfield War, which is an old movie, but it's about water rights between farmers and it deals a little bit with racism, but it's also mainly about water rights. And we can see it all the time. I mean, water rights are a big deal. And I know, serving on the Colorado State Denver School of Law board to rewrite the state constitution, it was a feasibility study. I learned there how extremely powerful a water board, probably the most powerful board in the state, because they were giving, you could say, favors to certain farmers over others, because certain farmers bought land and they were famous people in Hollywood, and they were getting water rights and took away from the other farmers, and it was a big deal. We also had Native Americans who were from the Ogallala Sioux Reservation talking about water rights and how a lot of their water rights have been taken away. So water is and always has been the backbone of a civilization. Because it's been so readily available for us here in this country, we take it for granted. I know you wanted to add something on the water rights thing, Greg.
Well, I was just going to point out, historically, like you did, that, water has been a tool for restricting life as well. Those who control the water control the land.
Exactly.
There's when we invade other countries, we are known for poisoning the water.
That's very true.
To poison the people, now we can take over the land because they're falling. We don't have to actually use the bullets. We just, the contamination of the water, and now we control those people.
Exactly.
And we use it as a manipulation tool. But all of that simply highlights the significance of water.
Exactly.
And why you need to be in control of your water destination, as opposed to relying or depending on others to provide it for you.
Right. One last thought on that. One thing that would be very, very helpful to have in your arsenal of equipment is a straw. You can get these now online. I know Life Straw is one of the brands. Sawyer is one of the brands. Less than $20, you can buy a straw that you can literally suck water out of a mud puddle and have it be filtered and safe to drink. It removes 99.999% of contaminants. Of course, there's that 0.0001 that might get you, but at some point you're going to have to take a chance. And I got one of those for my nephews for Christmas a couple of years ago. I thought, you know what? Here you go. This is for your family. Keep it on hand. So I think those kinds of things for less than $20, have that ready for you, because you can use that for a multitude of things, and that purifies a lot of water. With that, we're going to jump into another subject. Well, first of all, one of you two needs to talk about what we want our listeners to pay attention to.
What we want our listeners to pay attention to as far as the YouTube channel goes is we just like to give a shout out to Angelina Davis on her comment being the first one. We do appreciate you tuning in and listening to the Broad Perspective, and we encourage all of our listeners to give their open and honest opinion no matter what it may be. That is what the Broad Perspective is about you being open and honest and having a different perspective than what meets the status quo, and stepping outside the box with your thoughts. So we just like to give her a shout out and remind all of our listeners to click on the subscribe box, put the like button, and continue to follow us, because we really appreciate your views. And if you have anything that may be a show request or something you'd like to hear about, something you'd like us to research or touch on, or even something we may have missed on the topic that we're speaking on, we would surely appreciate your comments.
We really do. Go ahead, Greg.
And that was eloquently done there, Kevin. If we can shift now to our regular financial reports, I am going to highlight what is happening here, which is extremely significant. Right now, if you're not watching what the Federal Reserve does, and nobody does, right? They have now embarked on an unofficial QE4, which is quantitative easing. Now, for months, they've been talking about how the economy's on fire, everything's going great, and now the environment's perfect for them to start tightening. Easing is the opposite. Easing is what they've been doing, which is buying the bonds, the toxic bonds from real estate that no one wants because everybody's upside down, nobody's paying their mortgages and all the rest of the stuff. So instead of allowing those bonds to go belly up, which would have caused the complete meltdown of the global financial system, the central banks around the world have been buying those toxic assets. Now they professed that they were going to slow down that purchasing of these toxic assets. But instead, what they've done is they started a new program, but it's unofficial still. where they're still buying these assets, and you can see the evidence that they're still buying because of what is happening on their financial website, where you can go to I think it's FRED.gov is the website of the Federal Reserve, and you can look at the websites around the world and see those places as well, where they are still buying the toxic debt, and now they started buying corporate debt as well, which is something that Europe's been doing for the last 3 years now. And we're in a horrible situation now because what's happening is the markets are completely being controlled and maintained now. Nothing is happening organic anymore. This is the reason why the stock market keeps going up. And I know some of you are going to say, well, the stock market just lost value over the last 3 days. Well, that's because of the uncertainty and the turmoil. Those that don't watch the behind the scenes and don't have that inside information are reacting to what the media is telling them are the problems. We've also had a couple of major banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, as well as Morgan Stanley, have all reported that the markets are primed for a 25% drop or more. Mm-hmm. And so people are starting to react to that. But that's the reason why markets are going down, which means that the Federal Reserve is being forced to do even more efforts than they were to try to maintain that stability. And this is what's going to push us into hyperinflation. This is exactly what Venezuela had to do. This is exactly what Germany had to do in 1939. And we can go around the world with other examples where this is exactly the environment that pushed us into hyperinflation.
And elaborate hyperinflation, because there's going to be listeners that aren't going to understand the repercussions of that.
Hyperinflation, and I encourage you to go and look it up for yourselves. Hyperinflation is where the more that they print, and in our country we call it borrowing, the more that the United States borrows from the Federal Reserve, it's creating more dollars, therefore devaluing the dollars that already exist, and they're doing it at hyper speed. As a result, the price of goods and services continue to peak along with their efforts, which means a cup of coffee costs you today $5. 4 hours from now, it might be $5.25. You know, people will stop creating menus because the price keeps changing so much on a regular basis that it's not viable to actually have a menu. They'll just write it out by hand all the time.
What's the cost of a burger today?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so a perfect example would be in 2012, the Venezuelan Bolivar was at a 9-to-1 ratio. Today, it's at 246,000 to 1. And this is only in 5 years. That's a picture of hyperinflation.
Exactly. Yeah.
They've had to print so much. I mean, they have. You see the examples all the time. You know, the average person on the corner in Zimbabwe holding up $1 trillion bill, but he can't even buy a loaf of bread with $1 trillion bill. That's hyperinflation.
Exactly. So if you want better examples, go ahead and read about Venezuela. If you haven't been reading about Venezuela and paying attention, I'm sorry, but it's in the news a lot, and you need to find out because it could be us tomorrow. And we need to pay attention to that.
Venezuela is a living example, a living, breathing example of where we're headed. And this is why we need to study it so that you can see how to survive that environment, because it's coming whether you understand it or not. It's coming, and you need to know how to understand to deal with it.
Exactly. Go to our archives. We did a whole show on Venezuela, our interview with Erica Bailey, who is from Venezuela, and she has a lot of information she shared with us on what that's all about, because it is quite concerning, and it could be our future with a blink of an eye, and I mean a blink of an eye.
It is not going away.
No, it's not, and my heart goes out to all those people in Venezuela. In the meantime, it's been fun being on the show today and talking to everybody about what's happening with water. Hopefully there are people that are going to take action, take care of themselves and their families, and pay attention to this. Just learn about water and what you can do, and also learn about finance. Learn what's going on with hyperinflation and what the QE4 means, Quantitative Easing 4 means with the Federal Reserve. And with that, we are over. So we are going to thank you for listening today. Join us same time, same place next week, where it's all perspective. Join us and broaden yours. Thanks for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed today's show. To keep programs like this and other programs on the Broad Perspective Network, go to thebroadperspective.com and click the donate button. We truly appreciate your support.